Today's challenge will test how well you work with others, the chief judge announced on the sixth morning. You will be placed in random teams of 4. Your team must solve a series of problems together. The teams appeared on the big screen. Gina looked for her name and froze. She was teamed with Moktar of the Vreen and 2 aliens who had openly mocked humans. Draz, a crystal being with 6 eyes, and Ulo, a tentacled creature who could change colors. This will be difficult, Ambassador Lee whispered to her. Moktar will try to take control. The others will follow him. Gina nodded. I know, but maybe I can help in ways they don't expect. The teams went to separate rooms. Gina's teen room had 4 stations arranged in a circle. At the center was a hologram showing their first problem. Design a system to safely harvest energy from a dying star. Moktar immediately started giving orders. I will calculate the energy outputs. Draz, analyze the star's decay patterns. Ulo, design the collection mechanism. The human can observe. Gina sat quietly as the others worked. After 20 minutes, they began arguing. Your calculations are wrong, Draz told Moktar. This design will fail. My calculations are perfect, Moktar insisted. The problem is with your analysis. Ulo's skin turned red with anger. Both of you are missing the point. The collection system needs to adapt as the star changes. Jaina watched them argue, noticing something interesting. Each alien was an expert in their own area, but they couldn't understand each other's work. Moktar's math was too complex for Draz. Draz's analysis was too abstract for Ulo, and Ulo's designs were too practical for Moktar. Excuse me, Gina said quietly. No one heard her. Excuse me, she said louder. They stopped arguing and looked at her with surprise, as if they had forgotten she was there. I think I see the problem, she said. You're all working separately, but this challenge is about working together. What could you possibly contribute? Draz asked with a dismissive wave of his crystal arm. Instead of answering him, Gina walked to the hologram. Moktar, your calculations show the energy output changing in these patterns, right? She pointed to his work. Moktar nodded, surprised she understood. And Draz, your analysis shows the star will collapse in these stages. She pointed to his diagrams. Correct, Draz admitted. Ulo, your collection system needs to adapt to both of these factors. She turned to the tentacled alien. What if we combine them like this? Gina drew a simple diagram that connected all 3 parts. It wasn't as detailed as their work, but it showed how everything fit together. The 3 aliens stared at her drawing, then at each other. This could work, Moktar said slowly. The human is right, Ulo agreed, his skin turning a surprise blue color. We need to combine our approaches. For the next 2 hours, they worked together with Gina acting as a translator between them. When one alien couldn't understand another's work, Gina explained it in simpler terms. She didn't know as much as any of them, but she understood enough to help them communicate. When time ran out, their team had completed all 3 problems. They placed second out of 6 teams. As they left the room, Moktar pulled Gina aside. Your contribution was unexpected, he said. You have a talent for seeing connections. Humans have to be good at that, Gina explained. We don't have specialized brain parts like the Vreen. We need to connect different ideas to understand complex things. For the first time, Moktar seemed genuinely interested in what she had to say. Perhaps there is value in this human approach. That evening, the overall rankings were updated. Gina had moved up to 5th place. Word spread quickly through the Nexus. Some aliens were unhappy. Others were curious. A few began to look at her with something close to respect. Ambassador Lee was thrilled. 5th place. This is historic. No one expected a human to rank so high. Gina smiled, but she knew the hardest challenges were still ahead. Tomorrow would bring the one-on-one duels, and she already knew who her opponent would be. Lycid of the Orixians, who had tried to break into her mind. the telepathic alien who saw humans as primitive creatures. Gina would need all her human creativity to face what was coming. The competition hall was a giant dome with seats rising up all around. In the center was a circle of 22 pods, one for each competitor. The pods were clear bubbles where everyone could see the contestants' work. Gina's hands shook as she walked to her assigned pod. Thousands of aliens watched from the seats. She was the only human in the entire hall. "Welcome to the 87th Galactic Confederation Cognitive Olympics," boomed a voice. It came from the chief judge, a being that looked like a floating ball of light. "Today begins the first trials, logic and mathematics." The pods sealed shut. Screens appeared in front of each contestant. Gina took a deep breath as the first problem appeared. It was a logic puzzle about sorting objects under changing rules. Gina worked quickly, finishing just as the time ran out. The second problem was harder. It involved patterns that shifted in multiple dimensions. Gina had to close her eyes and picture the shapes moving in her mind. By lunchtime, they had completed 5 problems. Gina had no idea how she was doing compared to the others. During the break, she sat alone until a small green alien approached her table. "You are doing better than expected," the alien said. Its name was Kiro, from the Sentinel species. They were known for being fair and honest. "How do you know?" asked Gina. "I can see the judges' screens from where I sit," said Kiro. "You're in the middle of the rankings. The Vreen and Orixians are at the top, of course." Gina was surprised. Middle of the rankings was much better than last place, which is where most aliens expected her to be. After lunch came the pure mathematics section. These problems were about numbers and equations. One question was about something called 11-dimensional calculus. Gina had never heard of it before. Instead of panicking, she broke down the problem into parts she did understand. She found a new way to approach it. Her solution wasn't perfect, but it was creative. In the final problem of the day, contestants had to predict patterns in quantum particles. The Vreen, with their computational brain parts, finished in minutes. Gina struggled but found an answer just before time ran out. When the day ended, the rankings appeared on the main screen. Mukhtar of the Vreen was first. Lisset of the Orixians was second. Gina Kim of Earth was 12th out of 22. A murmur went through the crowd. No one had expected the human to place so high. "Impossible," Gina heard someone say. "She must have cheated." "The human got lucky," said another. Ambassador Lee met Gina as she left the hall. 12th place. "That's remarkable." Gina felt tired but proud. "I guessed on some problems." "Not guesses. Intuition," said the ambassador. "Something many aliens don't understand." As they walked toward the dining hall for dinner, Mukhtar the Vreen appeared in front of them. "Interesting performance, human," he said. His 4 arms were folded across his chest. "Though I noticed your solutions were unusual." "Is that a problem?" asked Gina. "It's inefficient. Tomorrow's challenges will require more than clever tricks." After Mukhtar left, Gina saw Lisset watching her from across the room. The Orixian's silver eyes narrowed. Gina felt that strange pressure in her head again, stronger this time. She quickly turned away. "Ambassador, can the Orixians really read minds?" "They can sense patterns in brain activity," he said. "It's against the rules during the competition, but..." He didn't finish the sentence. That night, Gina couldn't sleep. Her mind raced with problems and solutions. The aliens had natural advantages she could never match. But today had shown her something important. There was more than one way to solve a problem. The human way might be different, but that didn't make it wrong. Tomorrow would bring harder challenges, but for the first time since arriving at the Nexus, Gina believed she might have a chance. The final day of the Cognitive Olympics brought no challenges, only decisions. The Confederation Council gathered to discuss the results and what they meant. Gina sat in a special room with the other top contestants, waiting. Her victory over Lisset had caused an uproar. Some aliens demanded she be disqualified. Others defended her win. The debate had lasted all night. "What happens now?" Gina asked Ambassador Lee. "The council will decide your final ranking," he explained. "But whatever happens, you've already achieved more than anyone expected." The doors opened, and they were called into the great chamber. Hundreds of aliens from all species filled the room. At the center was a circular table where the council members sat. The chief judge spoke first. "This competition has produced unexpected results. A human contestant has reached the final round and won her match. Now we must decide what this means." An Orixian council member stood up. "The human used mental tricks in the neural arena. This is not true intelligence. Her results should be dismissed." Kiro, the small green sentinel, stepped forward. "I disagree. The human competed fairly. She adapted to challenges designed for other species. That shows a kind of intelligence we should respect." The debate continued. Some aliens spoke against Gina, calling her success a fluke. Others supported her, saying humans had proven themselves. Then, to everyone's surprise, Mokhtar of the Vreen asked to speak. "I have competed in these Olympics 5 times, he said, his 4 arms moving as he spoke. "I have won 3 times, and I have learned something important from this human." The room went quiet. The Vreen believe intelligence means solving problems with perfect logic. The Orixians believe it means seeing patterns through mental connection. Other species have their own definitions, but the human showed us something different. Mokhtar turned to look at Gina. She connected ideas that should not connect. She used emotions as tools rather than obstacles. She saw patterns we missed because we were too focused on our own methods. "What are you suggesting?" asked the chief judge. "I am suggesting," said Mokhtar, "that our definition of intelligence has been too narrow. The human's performance proves this. We should expand our understanding." Lisset stood up angrily. "So we should lower our standards because a primitive species cannot meet them?" "No," said Mokhtar calmly. "We should raise our standards to include types of thinking we have ignored." The council members talked among themselves. Finally, the chief judge announced their decision. Gina Kim of Earth will be ranked 4th overall in this competition. There was a mixed reaction from the crowd, but the chief judge continued. "More importantly, the council has decided to grant humans equal status in all Confederation research and development programs. The human approach to problem solving has proven valuable." Ambassador Lee squeezed Gina's hand. "This is huge," he whispered. "This is what we needed." After the ceremony, many aliens approached Gina to talk. Some were curious, some respectful, a few still doubtful, but they were all interested in what she had to say. Mokhtar came to say goodbye. "I will visit Earth soon," he said. "I want to learn more about how humans think." "You'll be welcome," said Gina. Later, as Gina prepared to return to Earth, a young human man approached her. He looked nervous. "I'm Li Juno," he said with a bow. "I've been selected as next year's human contestant. The ambassador suggested I talk to you before the competition." Gina smiled. "The most important advice I can give you is this: don't try to think like them. Think like a human. That's our strength." On the ship back to Earth, Gina looked out at the stars. The competition had changed her. It had changed how aliens saw humans, too. Humans weren't the strongest or smartest species in the galaxy, but they had something special. The ability to connect ideas, to think creatively, to use emotion as a strength. As Earth came into view, blue and beautiful against the blackness of space, Gina felt proud. She hadn't just competed for herself. She had shown the galaxy what humans could do. The battle of wits was over, and humanity had won its place among the stars. Asterisk, the end asterisk. Day 5 of the competition brought the hardest challenge yet, the quantum challenge. Gina read the instructions twice, trying to understand what was being asked. Contestants must solve problems based on 11-dimensional quantum physics, the chief judge announced. You will predict the behavior of particles that exist in multiple states at once. Gina felt her heart sink. Earth scientists were still learning about quantum physics. The aliens had studied it for thousands of years. As the challenge began, Gina stared at the first problem. It made no sense to her. The math was beyond anything she had learned. Around her, the alien contestants were working quickly. Mokhtar's four hands moved in a blur as he wrote complex equations. Lisette's silver eyes were closed as she seemed to just know the answers. Gina tried different approaches, but nothing worked. She finished the first problem just as time ran out, and she knew her answer was wrong. The second problem was even harder. Halfway through the challenge, Gina looked at the rankings. She had fallen to 15th place. "I can't do this," she thought. "I'm not ready for this level of science." For a moment, she considered giving up. All the pressure, the sabotage, the impossible problems, it was too much. But then she remembered Earth and everyone counting on her. During the lunch break, Gina sat alone, thinking hard. She wasn't going to win this challenge with knowledge she didn't have. But maybe there was another way. When the afternoon session began, Gina tried something new. Instead of trying to understand the complete quantum theory, she looked for patterns in the problems. These particles don't follow regular rules, she thought. They can be in many places at once. They connect in ways that don't make sense in our normal world. It reminded her of something from Earth. Philosophy. Ancient thinkers who believed everything was connected in hidden ways. What if she combined that philosophy with the math she did know? The next problem asked about particles that seemed to communicate instantly across vast distances. Earth scientists called this quantum entanglement. Gina wrote an equation that was part mathematics, part philosophical concept. It wasn't how the aliens would solve it, but it might work. To her surprise, her answer was marked correct. She used this approach for the remaining problems. Her solutions weren't elegant like Mokhtar's or intuitive like Lisette's. They were messy combinations of different ideas, but they worked. When the day ended, Gina had moved back up to 8th place overall. Not as good as before, but much better than 15th. Mokhtar approached her as she left the challenge room. "Your methods are unusual," he said. He sounded confused rather than dismissive this time. "I don't know enough about quantum physics," Gina admitted. "So I found connections to ideas I do understand." Mokhtar's black marble eyes studied her. Connections between different types of knowledge. Interesting. Vreen do not think this way. We separate knowledge into categories. Humans mix everything together, Gina said. Sometimes it creates new insights. That evening, Ambassador Lee was excited. "You're still in the top 10. And tomorrow is the collective test. It's about working together, something humans are good at." But Gina wasn't so sure. Would any aliens want to work with her? And could she trust them after all the sabotage? That night, for the first time since the competition began, Gina slept soundly. She had faced the hardest challenge and survived. More importantly, she had discovered something valuable. The aliens were brilliant but specialized. They excelled in specific areas but struggled to connect different types of knowledge. Humans, with their messy, mixed-up thinking, could see connections the aliens missed. As she drifted off to sleep, Gina smiled. Maybe being human wasn't a disadvantage after all. Maybe it was her greatest strength. "Today's challenge is different," announced the chief judge on the second morning. "You will enter the memory maze." Whispers spread through the crowd. Gina looked at Ambassador Lee with a question in her eyes. "The memory maze is a mental challenge," he explained quickly. "It creates a path based on your own thoughts and fears. Telepathic species usually have the advantage here." Gina's heart sank. This sounded like the perfect challenge for the Orixians. The contestants were led to a new room. In the center sat 22 chairs with strange helmets above them. Gina sat in her assigned seat, feeling nervous as the helmet lowered onto her head. "Close your eyes," said a voice. "When you open them, you will be in the maze. The goal is to reach the center. The maze will change based on your thoughts. Fear will create barriers. Clarity will create paths." Gina closed her eyes. When she opened them, she stood in a hallway with many doors. The walls seemed to shift and move like they were made of fog. She tried the first door. Behind it was a math problem floating in the air. Easy enough, she thought. She solved it, and the door led to another hallway. The next door showed her childhood home, but everything was too big, like she was small again. She had to climb giant stairs and squeeze through tiny spaces that made her feel trapped. This is testing my fears, she realized. She took deep breaths and pushed forward. A third door led to a room full of aliens all staring at her, judging her. She heard their thoughts. Primitive human. Too simple. Not worthy. Gina almost turned back, but then she noticed something. These weren't real aliens. They were her own fears given shape. And just like that, they became less scary. My fear creates barriers, she reminded herself. So I choose not to fear. The room transformed, the aliens fading away. A new door appeared. Meanwhile, in the real world, the judges watched screens showing each contestant's progress. Most were still in the early stages of the maze, but 3 were moving quickly. Moktar of the Vreen, Lysid of the Orixian, and surprisingly, Gina Kim of Earth. The human is doing well, one judge noted with surprise. Inside the maze, Gina faced her hardest challenge yet. She stood before a mirror, but her reflection showed not herself, but everyone who was counting on her. Professor Park, Ambassador Lee, all of humanity. You'll fail them, the reflection said. You're not good enough. Gina felt tears in her eyes. This was her deepest fear. Then she remembered what Professor Park had told her. Human stubbornness is our strength. I might fail, she told her reflection, but I will try my best. That's all anyone can ask. The mirror shattered, revealing the center of the maze. A glowing orb floated there. Gina reached out and touched it. She opened her eyes back in the real world. The helmet lifted from her head. Only 2 contestants had finished before her, Moktar and Lysid. Third place, said the chief judge, sounding surprise. The human contestant finishes third. The crowd was silent. Then Kiro, the small green sentinel, began to clap. Slowly, others joined in. Lysid looked furious. Impossible, she hissed. The maze tests mental strength. Humans are weak. Moktar just studied Gina with his black marble eyes. Perhaps, he said quietly, we have misjudged. That afternoon, the rankings were updated. Gina had moved from 12th to 8th overall. The news spread quickly through the Nexus. How did you do it? Ambassador Lee asked her later. The memory maze is designed to trap you in your fears. That's the thing, said Gina. Humans face fears every day. We know them well. And what you know, you can overcome. That night, as Gina prepared for bed, she noticed her door was slightly open. Had someone been in her room? Her notes were scattered, not how she'd left them. Someone was trying to sabotage her. The real challenge was just beginning. The final challenge will be one-on-one mental duels, announced the chief judge on the 7th day. The top 8 contestants will face each other in the neural arena. Gina felt her mouth go dry. The neural arena was where minds connected directly. No helmets or screens, just pure mental contact. The pairings appeared on the screen. Gina was matched against Lysid of the Orixians. This is bad, Ambassador Lee whispered. Lysid is a natural telepath. In the neural arena, she'll be even stronger. Can I refuse? Gina asked. The ambassador shook his head, not without forfeiting the competition. Hero approached them, looking worried. Be careful, Gina. Lysid has been telling everyone she'll prove humans are primitive. She's angry that you've done so well. Gina took a deep breath. I'll do my best. The neural arena was a circular room with 2 chairs facing each other. Between them was a glowing sphere of energy. As Gina sat down, Lysid entered with a confident smile, ready to see what a real mental challenge feels like, human. Before Gina could answer, The chief judge began explaining the rules. You will both connect to the Nexus mind through this sphere. A series of problems will appear that you must solve together. But you may also use mental defenses to block your opponent's progress. Gina looked up in surprise. So we're competing and cooperating at the same time? Exactly, said the chief judge. The first to solve 3 problems wins. You may begin. Gina placed her hands on the glowing sphere. Immediately, her mind expanded. She could feel Lisset's presence, cold and sharp like ice. The first problem appeared in Gina's mind. It was about predicting the evolution of a complex system. But before she could think about it, she felt a sharp pain in her head. Lisset was attacking her directly, sending waves of confusion and pain rather than focusing on the problem. This isn't fair, Gina thought. But she realized no one was stopping it. This was allowed. Gina tried to focus on the problem while defending her mind. It was like trying to do math while someone screamed in her ear. Lisset solved the first problem easily. The second problem appeared. This time, Gina was ready. When Lisset attacked, Gina didn't fight back directly. Instead, she recalled the philosophy lesson from Professor Park, the concept of emptiness. She imagined her mind as a clear lake, with Lisset's attacks just ripples on the surface. The pain was still there, but Gina could think around it. To her surprise, she solved the second problem before Lisset. The Eryxians' attacks grew stronger. Images of failure and humiliation flooded Gina's mind. Lisset solved the third problem. The score was 2-1. Gina needed to win the next 2 problems to succeed. The fourth problem was the hardest yet, predicting the outcome of a system with too many variables to calculate. Lisset struggled with it, giving Gina a chance. Instead of trying to calculate everything, Gina used intuition, a human skill that aliens often dismissed as primitive. She felt the answer more than thought it, and she was right. Score, 2-2. The final problem would decide everything. Lisset was furious now. Her mental attacks became brutal, no longer trying to distract but to hurt. Gina felt like her head would split open. In desperation, she tried something risky. Professor Park had once taught her about paradoxes, ideas that contradicted themselves yet could be true. Aliens struggled with paradoxes. They preferred clear, logical thinking. Gina focused on a famous human paradox. This statement is false. If it was true, then it was false. If it was false, then it was true. She projected this paradox toward Lisset while trying to solve the final problem. The effect was immediate. Lisset's attack faltered as her logical mind tried to resolve the paradox. It gave Gina just enough space to think clearly. The final problem involved finding order in chaos, seeing patterns where none seemed to exist. It was perfect for human thinking. Gina solved it just seconds before Lisset recovered. The human contestant wins, declared the chief judge, sounding shocked. Lisset stood up, her silver face dark with anger. She cheated. She used a mental attack that makes no sense. You attacked first, Gina said quietly, her head still pounding. I just defended myself with human thinking. The crowd erupted in confused talking. No one had expected this outcome. As Gina left the arena, dizzy but proud, she saw Mukhtar watching her with new respect in his black marble eyes. And behind him, many other aliens were looking at her differently too. The human had won. The trip to the Nexus took 7 days. Gina spent most of that time studying. She read about the alien species, their thinking styles, and past competitions. The more she learned, the more worried she became. When the ship finally arrived, Gina stood at the viewing window, amazed. The Nexus was enormous. It looked like a giant wheel in space, slowly turning. Lights of many colors shone from its surface. Impressive, isn't it? Said Captain Han, who had been quiet for most of the journey. The Nexus was built 300 years ago. It's where species from all over the galaxy meet on equal ground. Gina nodded. Equal ground. I hope that's true. After the ship docked, Gina gathered her few bags. Ambassador Lee was waiting for her at the arrival area. "Welcome to the Nexus," he said with a small bow. "The opening ceremony is tomorrow. Tonight there's a welcome dinner for all contestants." Gina's room was bigger than her whole apartment back home. The walls could change color based on her mood. The bed adjusted to her body perfectly. But she had no time to enjoy these comforts. She quickly showered and changed into her formal Earth uniform, a simple blue suit with the Earth emblem on the chest. The dining hall was full of beings from across the galaxy. Some had multiple arms, others had no arms at all. Some floated, some crawled. The room was filled with strange sounds as they all talked in their native languages. Small translator devices helped everyone understand each other. Gina felt very alone until Ambassador Lee appeared at her side. "Let me introduce you to some of the other competitors," he said. First, they approached a tall, thin alien with pale blue skin and 4 arms. "This is Mokhtar of the Vreen," said the ambassador, 8-time champion. Mokhtar looked down at Gina. His eyes were like black marbles. "Ah, the human contestant. How quaint." His voice through the translator sounded bored. "I've studied your species. Your brains are so limited." Gina kept her face calm. "Sometimes limits lead to creative solutions." Mokhtar made a sound that might have been a laugh. "Creativity won't help you with pure mathematics and logic." Before Gina could respond, they were approached by another alien. This one looked almost human, except for her silver skin and eyes with no pupils. "I am Lisset of the Orixians," she said. Her voice in the translator sounded musical. "I've been looking forward to meeting you, Gina Kim." Gina felt strange as Lisset stared at her. It was like the alien was looking inside her head. "The Orixians are telepathic," Ambassador Lee whispered to Gina. "But they've agreed not to use that ability during the competition." "Of course not," said Lisset with a smile that didn't seem friendly. "That would be cheating. I'm just curious about how a human thinks." Gina felt a slight pressure in her head, like the beginning of a headache. She stepped back. "I'd prefer if you stayed out of my thoughts." Lisset's smile disappeared. "As you wish." She walked away. Later, Ambassador Lee took Gina to a quiet corner. "How are you feeling?" "Outmatched," Gina admitted. "The Vreen have special brain parts just for math. The Orixians can read minds. How can I compete with that?" "You don't need to win," said the ambassador. "Just don't come in last. Show them humans belong here." But I saw how they looked at me, like I'm a child who wandered into an adult conversation. The ambassador nodded. "Yes, and that's your advantage. They underestimate you." Gina wasn't sure that was enough. But then she noticed something. Some of the aliens were arguing loudly in one corner. Others were showing off, trying to impress each other. They're nervous too, she realized, even with all their advantages. "Exactly," said the ambassador. "Intelligence comes in many forms. Don't let them convince you that theirs is the only kind that matters." As the dinner ended, Gina felt eyes on her from all sides. Tomorrow the actual competition would begin. The weight of an entire species rested on her shoulders. But for the first time since arriving, she felt a small spark of hope. These aliens were brilliant, yes, but they were also proud. And pride could be a weakness. Gina returned to her room and prepared for the first day of the greatest challenge of her life. Gina Kim stared at the message on her screen. She read it 3 times to make sure she understood. The Galactic Confederation wanted her to compete in their cognitive Olympics. Her, a human, the first ever. "This has to be a joke," she said to herself. Her small apartment in Seoul was quiet except for the soft hum of her computer. The year was 2157. Humans had been part of the Confederation for only 12 years. The 17 alien species in the group still thought of humans as the new kids. Not very smart ones, either. Gina was different. At only 19 years old, she had solved the Yang-Mills math problem. It had stumped mathematicians for over 200 years. Now she was famous, at least on Earth. A knock at her door broke her thoughts. Professor Park Do-hyun entered, his gray hair messy as always. "You got the message?" he asked. Gina nodded. "Is it real?" "Very real. The Confederation monitors all major scientific breakthroughs. Your solution caught their attention." Gina looked back at the screen. "But why me? There must be smarter people." Professor Park sat down heavily. "Your approach to the problem was unusual, creative. That's rare for humans, but even rarer for the aliens. They think in straight lines. You think in circles and zigzags. So I'm a curiosity, the human pet doing tricks." "Maybe at first," Professor Park agreed. "But this is our chance. Humans are still treated like children in the Confederation. They limit what technology they share with us. They restrict where we can travel and settle." Gina frowned. "One math competition won't change that." "Maybe not, but it's a start." Her phone buzzed. A video call from Ambassador Lee Tao, Earth's representative to the Confederation. She answered. The ambassador's face appeared, formal and serious. "Miss Kim, congratulations. This is a historic moment." "Thank you, sir, but I haven't done anything yet. Just being selected is remarkable. No human has ever qualified before." He paused. "But I must warn you, this isn't just a competition. It's politics." Gina felt a weight settle on her shoulders. "What do you mean?" "Many species in the Confederation want proof that humans are intellectually inferior. It would justify keeping us contained, limiting our growth. And if I fail badly, I give them that proof," Gina said quietly. The ambassador nodded. "The competition starts in 3 weeks on the Nexus station. A ship will take you there in 2 days." He smiled slightly. "The Confederation expects you to fail. What do you think about that?" Gina thought for a moment. All her life, people had underestimated her. The quiet girl, the one who seemed lost in her own world. Until she solved a problem no one else could. "Let them think what they want," she said finally. "I'll do my best." After the call ended, Professor Park smiled. "That's the right attitude. What are these aliens like? The ones I'll compete against?" "Formidable. The Vreen have won 8 times in a row. They have brain structures dedicated just to computation. The Orixians are telepathic. They can sense patterns in ways we can't imagine. Others have multiple brains or hive minds." "Great," Gina said. "And I just have my regular human brain." "Yes," Professor Park said, "but it's an exceptional human brain. And you have something they don't." "What's that?" "Human stubbornness." He stood up. "Pack your things. I'll help you prepare as much as possible before you leave." That night, Gina couldn't sleep. She looked out her window at the Seoul skyline, with its mix of ancient temples and modern towers. Somewhere up there, beyond the stars, aliens were preparing to prove humans didn't belong among them. "We'll see about that," she whispered to the night sky. 2 days later, she boarded the ship that would take her to the Nexus. As Earth grew smaller behind them, Gina felt small too, but also determined. One human girl against the brightest alien minds in the galaxy. The battle of wits was about to begin. Gina woke up with a headache. She had slept badly, troubled by strange dreams. As she got ready for the day's competition, she checked her notes again. Yes, someone had definitely moved them, but nothing seemed to be missing. At breakfast, she sat with Kiro, the sentinel who had been friendly to her. "Be careful," Kiro said in a low voice. "Some competitors don't like that you're doing well." "Have they done this before?" "Cheated?" Gina asked. Kiro's green skin darkened slightly. "It happens. The judges don't always stop it. Politics, you know." Gina nodded. The competition wasn't just about intelligence. It was about power between species. The third day's challenge involved solving problems while facing distractions. Each contestant wore a helmet that created loud noises and flashing lights. As soon as Gina put on her helmet, she knew something was wrong. The sounds were much louder than they should be. The lights were painfully bright. She could barely think. She looked around. Other contestants seemed uncomfortable, but not in pain. Her helmet had been tampered with. For a moment, Gina wanted to give up, but then she remembered her training with Professor Park. He had made her solve problems while playing loud music and bright lights to improve her focus. Focus on one thing at a time, she told herself. Block everything else out. Slowly, Gina worked through each problem. Her head pounded. Her eyes hurt. But she kept going. When the challenge ended, she had finished 9th. Not great, but not last either. That night, Gina couldn't sleep at all. Every time she closed her eyes, terrible thoughts filled her head. You'll fail. You're not smart enough. Everyone is laughing at you. These weren't her thoughts. She recognized what was happening. Licit, she whispered. The Eryxian was using telepathy to attack her mind. Gina got out of bed and walked around her room, trying to clear her head. On a hunch, she checked her water glass and found a strange powder at the bottom. Someone had drugged her water too. The next morning, Gina went to Ambassador Lee with Kiro by her side. I'm being sabotaged, she said. She showed him the powdered water and explained about her helmet and Licit's mental attacks. The ambassador looked grim. We need proof to present to the judges. I have proofs, said Kiro. The small green alien held up a tiny device. I put cameras in the hallway after I noticed suspicious activity. I recorded Mukhtar's assistant entering Gina's room yesterday. Together, they went to the judges. The chief judge, the ball of light, listened to their case. These are serious accusations, the chief judge said. We will investigate. But the investigation was quick and incomplete. Mukhtar's assistant was banned from the competition area, but Mukhtar himself faced no punishment. Licit denied any telepathic attacks, and since there was no physical proof, she was only given a warning. This isn't fair, Gina said to Ambassador Lee afterward. No, it's not, he agreed. But it shows they see you as a threat now. That afternoon, the fourth challenge began. It involved solving problems as a team with random partners. Gina was assigned to work with 3 aliens who clearly didn't want her help. One was a floating cloud of gas named Ziv. Another was a 6-legged insect-like being called Trell. The third was a blob of blue jelly with eyes all around its body. They ignored her suggestions and talked only to each other. But Gina noticed they weren't making progress. They kept arguing. Excuse me, she said finally. I think I see the solution. They stopped and stared at her. We're each trying to solve the whole problem, she explained. But it's designed for 4 minds working together. Each part fits our different thinking styles. Reluctantly, they tried her approach. To everyone's surprise, it worked perfectly. Their team finished 2nd. After the challenge, Trell approached her. Your solution was efficient, the insect-like alien admitted. Perhaps humans have some useful insights after all. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Gina had earned a small bit of respect. As she walked back to her room, Gina felt stronger than before. They could tamper with her equipment and try to poison her mind, but they couldn't stop her from thinking. The battle was far from over.